Hey everybody, I hope you are all out there staying safe wherever you are. Many of us are under a shelter-in-place warning. That is why my office is particularly deserted right now. I'm the only one in the studio. My videographer is working from home, and so is everybody else here in the building. So we will just dive right into things. If you want a sticker, we are giving them away for free, as I usually say. There's some more instructions down there in the description section. You can send a postage prepaid envelope, your return address on it, make sure and put a stamp on there, stick that in another envelope, and then you can send that on to the address that's down there in the description. It is a P.O. box. I check it about once a month, so don't expect these to happen instantly. It will take me a month or so to get to them, especially now that we aren't supposed to be going anywhere unless it is absolutely critical travel. We also have a new membership benefit, so if you are a member, you can hit that join button down there below your screen. Then we have some lapel pins here, somewhere here. Here we go. You can send an email to me and we will verify your membership if you are owed one of these little guys right here. That you will find on the membership page, so you can actually find instructions on how to get that one. As always, find us over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos. I have a bunch of those guys to give out there. And of course, Instagram, etc. If you are looking for a laugh, Instagram is just absolutely stupid stuff. And I've received a bunch of questions lately about that. And the main reason for me was I still don't quite understand why Instagram is a thing. I don't understand why we have Instagram and we have Facebook, and why I'm supposed to care about both, to be perfectly honest. So what I decided to do, since Instagram will never make me any money, was just lampoon everything that I ever seem to see on Instagram. So it's full of absolutely stupid stuff over there. Anyway, moving along from there, we have a lot of giveaways to talk about. It has been a while, so we are going to try and hold the giveaway live stream next Friday, also under quarantine, possibly from a remote location. So let's dive into what is being given away. If you are looking for a giveaway, you will email to itsaconspiracy@alexandautos.com. That's how you will get added to the list. We have a Volkswagen puffy jacket. It has a little beaver on the back there for some reason, and some discrete Volkswagen logos here and there. It's a Roots jacket right there. We have one of those. There's also a Toyota ski jacket. Well, I wouldn't necessarily call them ski jackets, sort of a medium weather jacket. We also have a bunch of different thermoses. We have a Mustang Mach-E thermos, a Texas thermos from Ram. We have a Taycan thermos right there from Porsche. We have some Ray-Ban sunglasses. These are, maybe I should just wear them for the entire podcast. Maybe they're corona-resistant sunglasses. I don't know. They're whatever they are. Anyway, that's them. We have a cutting board. I have no idea where that came from. Some smokehouse somewhere that a manufacturer sponsored. We have an Infiniti thermos. Thermoses seem to be very popular right now. We also have a Thermo Fisher Scientific thermos. Some JBL Bluetooth headphones. There's another Thermo Fisher thermos right there. There is a Shelby paperweight, GT500 paperweight right over here. We then have a bunch of hats. We have Honda hats. I have two of these guys right here if you feel so inclined for a Honda hat. And then a Jeep and a Honda hat up here as well. Lots of hats all over the place. There is even a Ram Pelican case right there. I'm not entirely clear what you would put in there, but it says it's a puck case. So I guess if you're a, I don't know, if you carry pucks around, there you go. We have more thermoses, more and more and more thermoses here. We've got another Ram one. We have a Genesis one. This one is another Porsche one. That's handy. And a Hyundai coffee mug. So that's kind of cool. And then there are also Alex on Autos t-shirts available. They have the logo on the front, and they say real detailed reviews on the back. If you would like other Alex on Autos merchandise, you can hit the merch link down there in the description that takes you over to Teespring. There is a random collection of stuff over there at Teespring that is available. I'm not entirely clear what everybody is interested in. So if you have any suggestions about what you might want to see on merch, you can actually email me at itsaconspiracy@alexonautos.com as well. So be sure and follow all that. And then remember that we still have a Toyota RAV4 hitch that we are giving away. So that you will email us for that as well. Be sure and identify in the email that you want to be added to the hitch giveaway, since that's very specific. You have to have a 2019 or 2020 Toyota RAV4 in order for that to be at all useful. So keep that in mind. And then, let's see here, cutting board, put the cutting board away. Should we wear the glasses? Is that a look? At any rate, so all of that's happening now. And with that out of the way, let's dive into what's coming up here soon. So we are editing a lot of videos at the moment. We have a bunch in the hopper. All press events have been canceled for the foreseeable future, understandably so. So I was supposed to go and drive the new Porsche Cayenne Coupe, the new Cadillac sedans, the new Buick Encore, which I was really interested in the Encore, I have to say, as well as the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid, and the Jeep Mojave, and all of that has been canceled. So hopefully we'll get those videos to you as soon as we can, but just not as soon as we thought. I was able, my last act before everything shut down here in California was that I was able to fly to Los Angeles and drive the Sonata Hybrid back. So that video will be coming up to you probably early next week if we can get our hands on it. At any rate, let's move on to what's in the hopper here. So we have the Toyota CHR, the Mazda CX-9, GLC 300, hybrid version of the Hyundai Ioniq, that's the refreshed one, the Nissan Titan, also post-refresh, QX50, a RAV4 versus Lexus NX video, Range Rover Sport with the mild hybrid system, the Sentra, the Sonata Hybrid, a Mercedes-Benz GLS video, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Mercedes GLB is coming up soon. Let's just hope that all those stay where they are. At this point in time, I would remind anybody that if you want to super chat, you can super chat down there. Depending on exactly how many people are viewing and watching and asking questions, that will theoretically get your question answered sooner. Apologize to everybody if we can't get to all of your questions right up front. Before we dive directly into everything here, let me scroll up and address one of the questions that I think we've been asked a lot lately. And this is kind of a loaded question, actually. Naveen is asking, why is it that some critics love to harshly criticize Toyota or Lexus, but others praise them? I actually disagree with that entire premise. I think that that we give credit where credit is due. I mean, we bought a Toyota RAV4, for instance, because it's unquestionably the best-selling entry in that segment. It's not the one that I might personally pick if I were buying one for my own family, but it's definitely a strong contender. And Toyota models are unquestionably reliable and generally fuel efficient as well. But I think that the origin of this question is that there are definitely alternatives out there that are just as competitive. And the reason that you will generally see dated Toyota models being described harshly is they're dated. When manufacturers design a new vehicle, they design them to be class leading, not class middling. So when Toyota designs a brand new vehicle, like the brand new RAV4, for instance, they decided it had to have best-in-class fuel economy, it had to have best-in-class cargo capacity, etc. And indeed it did. Does that mean that it's going to have best-in-class numbers forever? Most likely not, because 4 or 5 years later, there's probably going to be a new CR-V. The next time the CR-V gets redesigned, for instance, it's probably going to have better fuel economy. It's probably going to have more cargo capacity than we see in the current version, more power, etc. That's just the way of the world. So there also are brands out there that are being highly competitive. They're spending great deals of money out there because they're growing their sales base, and any company that is growing, generally speaking, has more money available for these things. And then there are brands that are either very stable in sales that don't have that same kind of financial ability, or brands, honestly, that have been shrinking over time. So the American brands are still dealing with a large production capacity, large distributor capacity, etc., but relatively smaller sales. And I think that, everybody has a brand that is their favorite, and some people like Toyota's branded products. But that doesn't mean that particular product is always going to be the best. And just because at this point in time, a Honda Civic might score above a Toyota Corolla, or a Kia Forte might score above a Toyota Corolla, doesn't make the Corolla intrinsically bad. And it doesn't mean that that winner in the segment is going to be the winner forever, because the next time you get a new car in that segment, it's probably going to be one of the best. It just seems to be how it works. I think this also follows the question I get frequently of why is it that when I read car reviews, almost every car gets a passing grade. Well, again, the reality is we're almost always driving the brand new car, and it's always the newest in the segment. So it's a little bit hard for it not to get a passing grade, because it's the freshest design. It's the one that has had a lot of R&D going into how is it going to compare. And nobody has been able to respond to it yet, is also the critical thing in that window. So if a manufacturer brings out a new car that is hugely successful, let's say, for instance, over recent years, the Ram 1500 turned out to be hugely successful. And as a result, we now see General Motors' response to that Ram 1500. They altered the suspension, they juggled around engine option packages, they tweaked towing here and there, etc., to make their option more competitive with the Ram. And when you see a brand new car out on the market, that generally just seems to be what happened. At any rate, let's move along here too. Let's see here. First question here, is the Hyundai Santa Fe 2.4 liter, sorry, a good option? I've always liked the Santa Fe, and here's my thought on that is it's not for everybody, because obviously the Santa Fe is bigger, it's heavier than something like a RAV4, like we were just talking about, but there's a lot of room on the inside. So if you're looking for something that's easy to park, it's a good city car, will fit in a tight garage, that might not be the Santa Fe, because it's a half step larger. But on the other hand, if you're looking for something that is RAV4 priced, and you're willing to take a slight performance hit, but you want the space, then the Santa Fe is an excellent option. And it really is almost alone in that segment. The Ford Edge is notably more expensive. The Murano's more expensive. We do have the Chevy Blazer, which is a pretty good deal. It also has a naturally aspirated engine option, but it really would be down to those two particular options, or perhaps a sideways step into something like a Subaru Outback, which is going to be also very reasonably priced, but a little bit more wagon in format. So we have similar room on the inside, but it's a little bit longer, not quite as boxy. Let's see here. Someone is asking, would we consider fuel tank size and range in upcoming videos? That's not something we typically get asked. So, I mean, unless it is astronomically strange, I'm not going to comment on it typically. So if a car has less than 300 miles of range, or somehow has 1,000 miles of range, then I might talk about it a bit. But I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I personally don't really care too much about how big the gas tank is or what the range is in a car, as long as it has, again, around 300 miles of range overall. Let's see here. Waiting to see the 2020 Highlander torque vectoring all-wheel drive test off-road. That will be interesting. The question for the torque vectoring all-wheel drive system in the Highlander would be exactly how is it programmed. Mechanically, it seems like it's about the equal of Acura's super handling all-wheel drive system without the overdrive functionality on the rear axle. So it looks like it is roughly similar to what we see going on in certain new General Motors products as well. Now, whether or not they have programmed the system to, for instance, give you a complete lock of the center coupling and then torque vector across the rear, even in high torque situations, that part we don't know yet. But if they could, then theoretically that system could deliver 100% of engine torque to a single rear wheel. So the front and rear differentials are always going to be locked together, but if both front wheels and one rear wheel had zero traction, in theory the system could send all the power over to another wheel. We just don't know whether the software will allow that to happen at this point in time. Let's see here. Someone's looking for a good networked dot matrix printer. I would suggest looking at Lexmark, probably. I don't know. Let's see here. Quick comments on the 2020 X3 M40i. I've always liked the X3. I think the X3 is the Honda Accord of crossovers in the luxury segment. And that's not a diss on BMW at all. But I think that Honda and BMW both are really good at creating products that are, average is not the right word here, but well-rounded, I guess would be the term I'm looking for. So I would argue that X3 does not excel necessarily in any one area. It's not necessarily the best value. It's not necessarily the best performance. It's not necessarily the best handling or the best ride, but it does all of those things really well. And when you take a look at some of the competition may do one thing well, but it doesn't do everything as at the same high level that we find in the X3. For instance, I think that the Stelvio and oddly enough the new GLC 300 have great feel out on the road. The Stelvio especially. It's quick, it has a great steering feel, etc. But it falls apart in so many other areas. The infotainment system is behind the times. The interior feels cramped. The cargo area is small, etc. The seat comfort isn't there. Volvo's XC60 really excels in the looks department. I think it's very attractive. The seats are very comfortable, and it is quite efficient, but it just doesn't handle like the X3 or the GLC, etc. It also hasn't been quite as reliable as some of the other options, but the BMW is just a very well-rounded package overall. Let's see here. When will we have our first Model Y review? I have been looking to try and see if we can find one on Turo, but if you're in the Bay Area and you have a Model Y and you want to let us borrow it for a few days, let me know. Again, you can email us at itsaconspiracy@alexautos.com, and we'll get back to you on that one. Hopefully soon, but I really don't know when it will be. Model Y production apparently is stopping in Fremont because of the coronavirus shutdown. There was some debate initially as to whether they were a critical business. Elon Musk apparently thought they were critical, and then the county decided that they weren't. So they had to shut down like all the rest of us. So moving along here. What's our opinion on luxury off-road manufacturers going with front-wheel drive platforms? Well, the reality is that there is definitely a need for commonality in platforms. And there are definite packaging advantages towards front-wheel drive platforms. So, for instance, if we take a look at the RDX and the XC60 versus a GLC or a Stelvio, etc., you'll notice that for roughly the same exterior size, you can have a lot more interior room in a front-wheel drive vehicle. There's also not necessarily anything particularly less capable about a front-wheel drive architecture as long as it was designed for that mission to begin with. And that is really the key, in that there aren't very many front-wheel drive components that are readily available that are really designed for off-roading. And most of the ones that we see are from FCA in their Jeep product line. Like the Cherokee, for instance, has a 2-speed transfer case setup. It's a really funky, complicated one, but it does have a 2-speed transfer case. It has locking differentials. It has the ability to send 100% of engine power to a single rear wheel, etc. But that adds additional weight and complexity to that platform that makes it pretty heavy as well. So it kind of loses some of the front-wheel drive advantages. Generally speaking, efficiency and packaging are the big reasons for front-wheel drive moves like that. Any news on the Sienna? Nope, no news from Toyota. The Sienna, if you're hoping for the Sienna this year, it's probably not going to happen, let's put it that way. We may see a Sienna launched at the rescheduled New York Auto Show later this year, but don't expect it to be on sale this year. Toyota has really kind of long lead times, I would say, for their products. So they will show them, and then they will build them quite a bit later, generally. It just happens to be the way that they plan their launches. So, for instance, the RAV4 and the Highlander, the time between when we saw the production one, had detail about the production one, drove the production one, and then it was on sale, was almost a full calendar year for both of those vehicles. And we are probably going to see something similar with the Sienna. We probably will also see something very similar with the Mirai. And I would have to say that if the Sienna was coming anytime soon, we would have seen it before we saw the Mirai. So you could tell that that's the cadence in their product line. Same goes for the trucks. We don't expect to see the trucks anytime soon here. What do we think of the Ford ST product? Seems like they're not all that good and have disappeared from the radar. I'm looking at you, Edge ST. Well, it depends on the ST product, I would say. The Fiesta ST is an awful lot of fun. The Focus ST is fun. There are some fuel economy realities and then realities around those platforms and their general age, which is why we don't see all of them available at the moment. But the Edge ST was a novel concept at the time, but because of the way the Edge is designed, it is a front-wheel drive vehicle as far as its base, it just can't deliver the kind of power that you would expect it to deliver. And that's why the Grand Cherokee just a regular Grand Cherokee V8 is by far the faster option. But things are a little bit different when we take a look at the Explorer, and that may be the future of Ford's ST product line. The Explorer definitely is quick on its feet. It's a rear-wheel drive vehicle. It uses the same 10-speed automatic that we see in their truck lineup. It's a pretty solid transmission. So I suspect that that's the direction that ST is probably going to go. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Edge ended up being a shortened Explorer at some point in its life. It would make a lot of sense, really, in that way. But it is important to remember that as far as crossover performance, there's not a lot of competition. And so everybody's going at this a little differently. For instance, there is a performance version of the Grand Cherokee and a performance version of the Durango. That's kind of unusual, really, in either of those segments. And then we have the Edge ST and the Explorer ST as really the only other option. And then the Explorer ST, its mission is different than the Durango SRT, as well as the theoretical upcoming Durango Hellcat. So Ford's performance design was putting it somewhere between the regular Ford Explorer and the Durango SRT, and you can see that in the price tag as well. So it's not priced like the Dodge. It's a tricky one because sales in that segment for performance options are not huge. So investing a lot of money in it is a tricky one. We are, however, going to see some performance options from Hyundai, which could get interesting. And then I would obviously argue that the RAV4 Prime that's going to be coming up soon is, in a way, a performance model as well. So we'll see how that does. Moving along here. Why are people so harsh on FCA cars? Dodge Dart was the first great compact, 200 great interior, Jeeps, blah, 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 blah. I actually don't. I think FCA is just oftentimes seen as the canary of the auto industry since they are a smaller player. But I also agree that FCA is judged a little bit too harshly, especially by people in our industry here. And the sales don't necessarily bear that out. When you take a look at FCA's sales, they generally are actually doing well in the segments that they choose to compete in. They're just not a full-line auto manufacturer. So you'll notice that, for instance, that they have abandoned the mid-size sedan market. They've abandoned the compact, subcompact market even. The 500 is gone from America soon. They've really focused on SUVs and trucks, which are higher profit items. And I would say FCA is about good business and good design, and a little bit less about fresh product or competing everywhere. And by that I mean, when you take a look at their product line, they sell a ton of high profit products. So the Chrysler 300, the Dodge Charger, for instance, they sell relatively well in their segments, actually. The Charger outsells Avalon by a bazillion, and it's a very old vehicle overall. But it still sells well, it's still very profitable, and they've made it fresh enough that it still sells. A common ding sideways from that on FCA, as well as Nissan, is the claim that, oh, all their sales are fleet sales. And while they definitely sell a decent percentage of vehicles to fleets, they're still selling cars. And by the numbers, nobody comes close to, for instance, Dodge Charger. Even if you exclude fleet sales, it still is above Avalon. Similarly, the minivan line still sells well. Yes, there's a high percentage of fleet sales on the Dodge Caravan, but the Pacifica's fleet numbers are not that far off most manufacturers. And I would also remind people when they're talking about fleet sales that the typical line from my friends over at Honda, I give them a hard time for this, is they're like, well, we don't sell to fleets. And that is an asterisk, yes, but Honda does not have a direct fleet sales program, but they absolutely most definitely do end up selling vehicles to fleets. It's just that if you're a fleet buyer, you go to a Honda dealer and you buy your car from the Honda dealer in whatever quantities you want, and they're not tracked as fleet sales. So the big deal is we just don't know how many cars Honda sells to fleets. You will definitely still find them at rental car agencies. I was recently in Hawaii, and there was a whole line of Honda Accords at the Hertz booth. We just don't know exactly how many they sell to fleets. The big thing is they don't have a fleet discount program, and if you're a fleet customer and you go buy a van or a truck from FCA or from Ford or from General Motors, they're going to give you $500, $1,000, $5,000 off depending on your volume of purchases. So theoretically, that could hurt resale value in the long run. But I would say if you take a look at the financial, submittals from FCA, they're in very healthy territory right now. So FCA does not have the financial problems or baggage that we saw that they had 10 years ago. Now, if they can ride out this current sales slump without resorting to overbuilding and trying to stuff the pipeline with cars that nobody wants to buy, then we'll see if they can keep from replaying some of their old tricks. But I would suspect that FCA is going into this current sales slump in a pretty good position overall. Let's see here. So Abe is asking, would you buy cash, lease, or finance? That is a tricky question that really depends on your personal situation. And I would argue your tax situation as well. So if, for instance, you're debating between paying cash and financing, then the question is more of a financial question, is what could your cash be doing for you during the period of time where you would finance the vehicle, especially if you get a really low interest rate on financing. And right now we're full of 1% or 0% finance offers. If you can get a 1 or a 0% finance offer, just finance the car, even if you have the cash for it. Save the cash, have it do something else for you, invest it somewhere. Go ahead and do the finance. Now, the lease question, that's a little bit more tricky. If you're the kind of person that likes to have a new car all the time, that's what leasing is for, in theory. But ultimately, yes, it's going to be more expensive than if you had just bought the car and kept it forever. There's just no two ways about that. If you're a business, however, leases may be more tax advantageous. If you're self-employed, sometimes they may be more tax advantageous. Or some companies out there will give car allowances for leased vehicles. So if that's something that a perk that your job can get you, then there's another reason to do that as well. Let's see here. Moving along. Anything on the twin turbo Tundra? I would believe it when I see it. Let's put it that way. Looking to buy a RAV4 Adventure. I like the Adventure. I'm just always curious why we have the Adventure in a way. It's like it's not, and the TRD version of the RAV4. They're so close together. I'm not quite sure why they didn't just pick one. And at the same time, I would also say that if you really planned on taking your compact crossover more rugged off-roading, you're probably going to want the Cherokee anyway. The RAV4 Adventure exists in this interesting little world where it's arguably as capable as top-end trims of the Cherokee, the Jeep Cherokee, but not nearly as capable as the Trailhawk versions of the Cherokee. And I'm not sure what that customer looks like. That says if you want the look, that makes sense. But if on capability, I'm not sure what customer says. I want to go and crawl over small rocks and through riverbeds, but I don't want to do anything more aggressive, and I don't want to do anything with camber changes on elevations or something like that. I would argue you're either taking your thing off-roading or you're not, and I'm not sure who's in the in-between. Let's see here. Mazda CX-30 or NX300? I would CX-30. Let's see here. Do you think Ford botched the release of the Explorer? I don't think so. I've noticed that they did have some problems with reliability and other things, but it's a little bit difficult to say they botched it necessarily. I think that they could be smoother at generally releasing products, but I don't think there's anything specifically going wrong necessarily just there. Let's see here. C8 Corvette review. That's going to take a while because it looks like press loans for it have dried up a bit. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. Chevy did not cast a terribly wide net when inviting people to drive the C8, and we've been kind of seeing that for sure here. Someone's asking Highlander XLE versus 2021 Kia Sorento hybrid or plug-in hybrid. I try not to speculate or guess there, so I would say you're going to have to wait. I would say they're probably going to be very, very well matched because the Highlander, the Pilot, and the Sorento, and the Acadia to some extent, are the four vehicles in that small little subset. So they're smaller than the average three-row crossover at the moment. Very similar on the inside, very similar on the outside in terms of overall size. The Sorento is probably going to be less expensive to start because it's probably going to have a naturally aspirated four-cylinder engine again. The plug-in hybrid's an interesting option, though. We have heard that that's going to come. We don't know any of the details just yet. Someone's asking for us to review the Mercedes-Benz GLC We are going to have a GLC 300 review here very, very soon. There is a review of the previous model year's GLC 43 that you can check out as well. Highlander Prime anytime soon. We have not heard anything about that just yet. Let's see here. G70 versus Stinger 3.3. I would probably Stinger just because of the trunk. I do like the lift back design. The G70 feels neater and tidier. It's a better driving vehicle, but I would probably get the Stinger if my money were on the line. Let's move on here. Any information on the Ford Bronco? Sadly, no. I was actually supposed to fly out and see info on the Ford Bronco that we probably could have shared with you by now. However, the coronavirus shutdown got everything in the way, and sadly that has just not happened. How will COVID affect auto sales? It's looking like it's not going to do any good for the auto sales. Auto sales are definitely down already, and we can definitely see that on traffic already. So traffic here at Alex and Autos and pretty much all associated sites and related sites are definitely down. Let's see here. What's our opinion on EV vehicles? Which one gives the highest range? Well, at the moment in time, the longest range is definitely going to be a Tesla. So that's easy to say. It depends on exactly what you're looking for, though, as to whether that range is a problem or whether it matters to you, etc. We do have some excellent options out there and excellent options coming soon, of course, as well. By the end of this year, we should see at least 4 or 5 brand new EVs. The Ford Mustang Mach-E looks pretty tasty. I do like the way that it looks. We'll have to wait and see how it drives and all of that until after the coronavirus subsides here. But as far as range, the range definitely is still going to be on the Tesla side. I don't see much happening that will change that, to be perfectly honest. Do we know when the new Grand Cherokee or Durango are coming, and are they staying body on frame or unibody? At this point in time, we don't really know. So there are 2 different rumors going on. The first rumor is that we will see a Durango Grand Cherokee pairing again, and that rumor indicates that they would be unibody. So same thing as we see now, where the Durango is a stretched Grand Cherokee. The alternative concept coming out is that perhaps Durango might become a body-on-frame SUV and coordinated with a larger 3-row Jeep. Now, we know the 3-row Jeep is definitely happening, but we don't know whether that will be the corollary to the Durango in the product lineup or not. It does sound like the Durango is going to get another refresh, and that means that any of these decisions are going to be at least another year or 2 away. The rumor mill is telling us that the Durango will probably get the mild hybrid systems out of the Ram pickup trucks at some point, probably for next year. That's the thought there. 2021 Hyundai Elantra. I have to say that I like the front end and I like the interior, but the back end looks like someone took a front end loader on the tractor and just sort of tapped the back end of a car, just sort of very gently, and pinched it in. I want to see it in person because I'm not sure if I'm a big fan of that design right away. Any insider on the 2021 Kia Optima K5? No info yet, sadly. I'm hoping we'll see it. I'm assuming that we might see it. We may actually have even seen it in Geneva, but Geneva got canceled. And New York got canceled as well. So we don't know. There have been some renderings out there. There are a few drawings that we've seen. Most likely, it's going to be the same drivetrain lineup that we see under the hood of the Sonata. The big deal is that the Optima is supposedly going to get all-wheel drive. That is the one thing that we've heard. So if you want, for instance, the Sonata N-Line's engine, the new 2.5-liter turbo engine, but you want it with all-wheel drive, that's probably going to be an option over there on the Optima, but it's not on the Sonata. It's also conceivable that we may get a higher horsepower version of the Optima in the US that we would not get in the Sonata. And that seems to follow the logic of how Hyundai and Kia are trying to stay differentiated. So Kia is trying to be the more sporty outlet for a product. So more aggressive design, theoretically higher horsepower engines available, that sort of thing. In general terms, they're basically the same engine lineups, however, from one product to the other. We have an Elantra Sport, we have a Forte GT, but the Elantra is supposed to be the slightly nicer option. I think it really just ends up being what style you prefer. So let's see here. What do we think about the Cross Sport 3.6? Well, we will have it soon for a full review. The Cross Sport 3.6, I kind of wish it was a little bit more powerful, and I have to admit that my final word on it is really going to depend on how much it ends up costing as far as deals and cash on the hood goes. Because as it is now by MSRP, it seems a little pricey. But generally speaking, Volkswagens seem to have more of a discount than we would find in something like a Honda Passport. So if that's true, then I would say it's probably still going to be a great deal, especially if you want something that's bigger on the inside. It definitely has that big feel to it. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more nimble, it might not be the best option. Let's see here. Lion Runner saying FCA lacks reliability, blah, 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 blah. Here is the tricky bit, I would actually have to say there. FCA's products, as far as reliability, fall in the average category. And remember that there are a ton of brands that people buy frequently that fall well below that mark. And this ends up oftentimes being very brand specific. So, for instance, if we take a look at all the reliability metrics we have out there, some vehicles like the Charger and the Challenger tend to be very reliable in the Chrysler FCA lineup. Some products that have had reliability issues tend to be the more complicated vehicles, and then there's just more to go wrong there. So if you've got a Jeep Cherokee with a 2-speed transfer case and locking differentials, you've got a whole bunch of components that no other vehicle in that segment has, period. We also see a few hit dings in their reliability because of the ZF 9-speed automatic transmission. And this has affected not just FCA reliability, but also Honda and Acura reliability. If we take a look, for instance, at the Odyssey and the Honda Pilot, etc., Pilot and Odyssey reliability has not necessarily been better than Chrysler Pacifica reliability or Dodge Durango reliability, so definitely keep those things in mind. It's also worth keeping in mind that when we take a look at J.D. Power numbers, as far as yearly defects, or even Consumer Reports numbers, the delta between a reliable car in America and an unreliable car in America is an awful lot smaller than it was 40, 50 years ago. So, for instance, in the average window of ownership, 3 years, 4 years, etc., you may have on average 1 to 2 more problems in an FCA vehicle than a Toyota vehicle, but we're talking, over the lifetime of the vehicle, no more than 4 or 5 extra problems as far as lifetime to consumer here. So, and what those problems are is difficult to divine, because when we take a look at J.D. Power numbers or even Consumer Reports numbers, they will identify problems like infotainment system unreliability, or infotainment system ease of use is actually a component in J.D. Power's numbers. And so having your infotainment system be easy to use versus actually intrinsically reliable, that's not quite the same thing. You also have to remember that when they're talking about problems per 100 vehicles or problems per 1,000 vehicles, and they're trying to give you relative numbers, that doesn't tell you what the problem was. So if the problem is, my infotainment system rebooted, that's different than my car failed to drive down the road. Just keep that in mind there. Let's see here. Fastlane Car is asking any updates on your Rivian. Ooh, I wonder who from Fastlane is watching me now. Is it Tommy or is it Roman? It must be Roman. He's pretty bored lately. No updates on the Rivian, sadly. Theoretically, we have one of those on offer right there, and who knows? They have announced that they have stopped holding their public reveal and, dog and pony show events because of the coronavirus scare. Theoretically, it's still happening for the end of this year, so hopefully views and revenue will turn around, because we are definitely in a big slump right now, and we'll actually be able to afford that Rivian. Let's see here. Thoughts on the car market as a whole and advice for consumers. I think we're in a good place right now. We have never seen cars, honestly, that are this affordable, this reliable, this safe, this fuel efficient, etc. Now is definitely the time to be buying and looking at a car. I've never been one to wax poetic about old cars. I'm just not an old car person, I guess. Call me a Philistine. But when someone says, I really loved my 1980s whatever, I look at that and I say, yeah, but it polluted, it was inefficient, it was unsafe, all these things. Maybe it was more fun because of the rawness of the experience, but generally speaking, any modern car is going to be faster than its counterpart from 30 years ago. It's going to handle better. It's going to stop shorter. And then when you fail to stop, it's going to keep you safer than any of those old cars. So that's my general thought there. Do we think that Chrysler is going to redesign the 300? I don't know. I actually really wonder that. I assume that at some point they're going to have to massage the design. But like I said, Dodge Charger is far and away the best seller in that segment. And when you take a look at the Chrysler 300, as old as it is not the slowest seller there. And we have manufacturers like Kia that have completely redesigned the Cadenza. Actually, let me rephrase that have refreshed the Cadenza. And then we have manufacturers like Toyota that have completely redesigned the Avalon. And the new and refreshed products still fail to outsell the ancient ones in the segment. Very similar with the Dodge Challenger, honestly. The Challenger is, number 1 or number 2 in the segment, depending on the month that you're looking at, and it is so old compared to the Mustang. But I have to admit that if I were renting a car or borrowing a car, I would want the Mustang. But if I were to buy the car, I'd probably buy the Challenger because it's just more comfy, it's easier to live with. It's not as much fun, unless you get the stupid ones, the absolutely batshit crazy ones. Then those are a laugh a minute. But for the average model in that segment, I think I would probably end up with the Challenger. Let's see here. Given the rise of hybrids, do you see non-hybrid vehicles continuing to sell or be produced? I think that we are at a point where we are going to see more and more styles of hybrids become the norm, far more than we're going to see a rise in EVs. If we take a look at all plug-in sales, anything with a plug, that's full EVs and plug-in hybrid EVs, they managed to reach 1.8% of the US market last year. And that means that they are less popular than manual transmissions and less popular than diesels. So bear that in mind. But hybrids, on the other hand, we do have a surprisingly strong showing in hybrids, especially when those hybrid systems are either standard, no-cost options, or when they're a very rational cost option. So, for instance, the Toyota RAV4, it looks like they're selling about 100,000 RAV4 hybrids a year. So that is outselling Prius by a mile. It looks like we have a pretty high take rate also in the Camry hybrid, the Highlander hybrid, the Avalon hybrid, etc. We don't know too many details about the Corolla hybrid. Probably wouldn't be surprised if that was a low take rate option for an entirely different reason. But interestingly enough, it seems that the best-selling hybrid in America right now is not a Toyota hybrid. It's not the RAV4 hybrid. It actually is the Ram 1500 pickup truck. Because if you get the base engine in the Ram 1500, it comes as a mild hybrid. FCA doesn't like using that term, but technically it's a hybrid. And then if you get the optional V8 engine, it's also a hybrid. Only the V8 in the middle is the non-hybrid option in the Ram 1500. And I suspect that we're going to see more and more of that going forward. We also see mild hybrids available, for instance, in the Jeep Cherokee in the lineup, and theoretically soon the Durango and Grand Cherokee as well. The main reason for that is they need to improve their fuel economy and reduce emissions. It's the only way to do that in large volumes with limited product. So we have a video on that as well you can watch on the channel. The logic here is that if you could make, with the same number of batteries, if you could make 10 hybrids or 10 plug-in hybrids, your best bang for the buck as far as improving your fleet average fuel economy as well as reducing overall emissions in a global sense, you're better off making 10 of those or 5 plug-in hybrids than one full EV. Because the one full EV will obviously have an impact on that person's fuel consumption, but it won't have as big of an impact on global fuel consumption as the 10 hybrids or 10 plugins. And right now, all those battery systems, etc., are definitely limited production capable things. So we can't mine enough lithium at the moment. We can't pull it out of seawater quickly enough at the moment. We can't make enough batteries at the moment. Clearly, someday the production capacity will obviously get there. But until then, we are in a production constrained world. And so I would say it logically makes sense to try and move as many things over to hybridization as possible and then move things slowly to plug-in hybrid and then move to battery electric vehicles later. But that's a rational world and we don't live in a rational world. So keep that in mind as well. Given the recent rise, oh, here we go. I already answered that one. Supra review for a full week. Actually, yes, it will be coming, but I think that the reason that it's happening so late is because Toyota realized that they wanted to add more power to the Supra. So they launched the Supra, and then the year later, they added more power, and Theoretically, I was supposed to drive that in 3 weeks or so, but that's obviously been canceled. Theoretically, those cars will head out probably sometime around June, so we might be able to have one around then at this time. Let's see here. Anything new from Subaru? It doesn't look like anything at Subaru is due for a replacement just yet. It would most likely be something along the lines of the Impreza, but the Impreza is not overly old. So I would say at least for the next 12 to 18 months, don't expect any big news out of Subaru. There have been some rumors about the BRZ being redesigned with Toyota. I'm kind of not counting that because it's such a slow seller. Let's see here. I guess the lampshade industry is thriving in California. Why, yes, it is. Although I think this one was made in Vietnam. So, any rate. Buick Regal GS or Arteon, I would probably go for Regal, unless the Arteon was a good deal. I do like the style of the Arteon. It was the substance of the Arteon I think that I had a little bit more of a problem with. And I have to admit that if you're looking at an Arteon or a Regal GS, I'm not entirely sure why you wouldn't just get a Kia Stinger. It's just more fun. Let's see here. How has the coronavirus affected auto sales? It seems to be primarily that people don't want to go to dealers and buy cars. So quite logical there. Will the RAV4 be on time? I don't suspect that products like the RAV4 are going to get delayed. It seems that the side of the industry that is dealing with tooling and production hasn't slowed down yet. We might still see some slowdown at some point, but it depends on where that tooling is happening. It's my understanding at the moment that RAV4 Prime will be built in Japan, and Japan does not seem to be delaying any of their production readiness timetables. Now, whether the launch event's on time or sales go on time, that I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that production probably is going to stay about on schedule. Let's see here. Thoughts on the Macan S? Oop. Sorry about that. YouTube has a very terrible comment thing here, and it's hard to actually see what's going on here. Thoughts on the Macan S and thoughts on the new Mercedes-Benz E-Class. Hopefully we'll be able to drive the Macan S soon. It is definitely fun. I've driven it for a very short amount of time. It's expensive but fun. So Porsche has, I think, rightly squirreled themselves away in a very small subset of that category where they're focusing on higher dollar customers and more engaging experiences. There's obviously a cost to that, but I think that overall that's the right direction for that brand to go. We also see something somewhat similar with the Mercedes too. The GLC tends to be much more expensive than an Audi Q5, for instance, for a similar configuration. Definitely more expensive than something along the lines of an Acura RDX. Moving on here. Did Infiniti pay you for airtime? No, they actually did not. To tell you the truth, Bob, I filmed that Infiniti video ages ago, and I was not going to do anything with it. But because of coronavirus, I decided that we need to pull out all the videos that we haven't used for a while, and we just need to get them done. Because honestly, we survive on advertising revenue here, and advertising revenue is down. So, we got to pay the bills. We actually are contemplating our very first sponsored post, however. That would be a Car Guru's car shopping app. I have to figure out whether or not I like the app first because I refuse to do any sponsored content for an app that's terrible. So we are working through that. It may or may not happen. Don't know whether it will or not. But here at Alex and Autos, we have actually never done any sponsored content. So no manufacturer has ever paid us directly for anything. We've never accepted any kind of in-kind compensation for anything. Even giveaways that they give away at launch events, we give right back to all of you here. That probably does nothing for me other than means that we are wasting resources and giving up money that we could take. But it makes me sleep a little bit better out at night. So moving along here. Just bought a new 2020 RAV4 Hybrid. Do you think it'll stand the test of time? It should be fine. In general terms, Toyota's hybrids have been the most reliable option in their lineup. So if we take a look at RAV4 Hybrid versus RAV4, generally speaking, the RAV4 Hybrid is the more reliable option. Prius is generally considered to be the most reliable vehicle that's currently out on the road right now. So I don't expect anything different right there. After we've used the Nexo, do we think this is a good final product? Is it more of a run and drive concept? Well, obviously the Nexo and the Mirai and the Clarity to some extent are rolling production concepts, I guess you could call it. Mainly in that it is definitely not a moneymaker for any of those three auto manufacturers. So Toyota, Honda, and Hyundai obviously lose money on every fuel cell vehicle that they sell. But I have to say, I really like the Nexo an awful lot. It's very well put together. It's a comfortable car. It's quiet. It's easy to live with. And I like the philosophy and the mechanics, basically, of a hydrogen car. It makes an awful lot of sense for bigger vehicles to use fuel cells. There's just this problem with infrastructure and all of that going in there. We're so at the beginning of the curve on any possible hydrogen future. It's difficult to speculate, and unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. Let's see here. Do you ever see Hyundai and Kia adding the option of a mechanical limited slip differential on the turbo and the Elantra Forte to compete with the Civic Si and Jetta GLI? I don't think that we will. I think that if we do see more of a performance angle from them in the future, it would be in the form of a full-on N product. So if we ever got an Elantra N, then maybe we would see something like that on there. But I don't see anything along that line on the Forte GT or on the Elantra. We don't know exactly what the future holds there for those products yet. We'll see what goes on. They're in the middle of redesigning some of their transmissions. So it's possible that the new 8-speed dual-clutch transmission could accommodate one. But at this moment, the old 7-speed dual-clutch cannot. That's what we're told from the factory. There's probably an aftermarket kit you can do, but theoretically from the factory, cannot accommodate a limited slip differential. And as far as we know, the 8-speed automatic that the new 1.6-liter turbo is fitted with cannot accommodate one either. Now, the new 8-speed dual-clutch, that might be different, but we don't know exactly for sure yet. Let's move along here. Eevee that yields the greatest range at the moment, that is the Model S in one particular trim with the biggest battery. That gives you the longest range. It's just about the same range as some of the fuel cell vehicles out there right now. Let's move along here. Why does everyone hate FCA 2.4 when every non-turbo 4-cylinder has about the same horsepower and same buzzy noises? And why don't people know that Honda uses the ZF transmission? Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea why they don't think it uses the ZF transmission. I don't know. ZF, I think everybody's surprised about the ZF 9-speed because ZF's 6-speed and 8-speed rear-wheel drive transmissions are perfection. Easily my favorite transmissions on Earth. But their 9-speed front-wheel drive transmission was honestly a little bit of a flop. I like the concept behind what they did with the 9-speed, but the application just needed a lot more polish. And it's important to remember that ZF's 9-speed front-wheel drive transaxle has not necessarily been unreliable. It's that people complain about the way that it behaves often. And so customers will go in and they will demand new transmissions because they'll say, my transmission has a problem. It shifts strangely. It shifts strangely. It shifts strangely. And then at the beginning, especially, Honda was just throwing new transmissions at this problem. So was FCA, really. So they were just replacing transmissions. But there was nothing wrong with the transmissions that they were replacing. And that led customers to become more upset because they said, well, my new transmission did the same thing as my old transmission. And at no point somehow in this process was it ever thought that maybe we just need to tell customers that's just the way that it is. And maybe that's not very attractive, but it's factual. The ZF 9-speed automatic transmission, by its very nature, will never, ever be as smooth as the Ford GM 8 and 9-speed automatic, the Honda 10-speed automatic, or the Hyundai Kia or Toyota 8-speed automatics. It's just never going to happen because of the way that it's designed on the inside. It's impossible for it to ever be as smooth as a traditional automatic. And the eternal problem with reliability numbers in that transmission seems to be that we don't know how many transmission replacements are actual failures. And it's important to note that when I've anecdotally discussed from dealers that I know about vehicles that have exceeded their warranty, and this is from FCA dealers as well as from Honda and Acura dealers, That it seems like once the car has gone out of warranty, all of a sudden transmission replacement frequency drops through the floor because the manufacturer's no longer paying for the transmission, but these people are still driving it, so it clearly is still functioning. A lot of complaints around that transmission. At any rate, let's move on. Let's see here. RAV4 hybrid versus Escape hybrid in value for money. I would say value for money, the Escape hybrid is definitely going to be better because you're going to get more of a discount on the hood of the Ford, generally speaking, than we find in the RAV4. We don't see the same same sales split over there with the Ford Escape yet, which has kind of surprised me. So with the RAV4 hybrid, it's hard to find one. They can't build anymore. They're selling about 20-25% of the RAV4 sales are hybrids. We don't see that same drive for hybrid models of the Escape for some reason. So it seems to be a better deal, especially just on that front there. Let's see here. Will the RAV4 Prime come with a spare tire? Probably not. We don't know for sure, but I would guess no. Let's see here. Do we think the direct sales concept will ever happen in the US? I am going to say I doubt it because of the way that dealers are set up in the US. So dealers are all franchise arrangements. And if you've never worked for a company that does franchising, you may not understand what that really means, but franchises are highly regulated relationships between the franchisor and the franchisee, the one that's licensing and leasing the name, and the company that has leased the name. And these franchise agreements run for multiple years. The exact length of time varies from agreement to agreement and state to state. And we also live in a country where there is a patchwork of different franchise dealer laws. So every state has their own unique take on this. Franchises are essentially sold through the franchise circular offering process, where these agreements have to be ratified by the state. They have to be approved by the state franchising agencies. Then they have to be sold, and there's so much drama and complicated red tape paperwork with those arrangements that I doubt it's really possible to completely undo them. For better or for worse, however you feel on that side, I have to say that I think I would prefer a direct arrangement with a manufacturer, and I would suspect that most manufacturers would prefer that as well. They're never going to admit that, but they would definitely prefer it. Because you can't control what the dealer does. They're a franchise. They're not directly under your control. And I've often said that they are the weakest link in the chain, to be perfectly honest. A manufacturer like Volkswagen or whoever else can build the best product in the segment. They can price it properly, etc. They can back it up with a good warranty. But your interaction as a consumer with that product is via a dealer, and the manufacturer has very little control over what that dealer did. They can't train the staff directly. They cannot hire the staff. They can't fire staff that they don't like. If there's a massive complaint against the dealer, it's not like the car company can just say, oh, well, we're going to close that Honda dealer down because they screwed up business with 5 customers or 6 customers. That's not how that works. You can only terminate arrangements within the clauses of the franchise agreement, etc. And so it's definitely a sticky thing. Now, some manufacturers have really great dealers, and they're an asset more than a detriment. But there are also some bad dealers going on there as well. Let's see here, moving along. Opinion on the Nissan 3.8. I'm assuming we're asking about the brand new Nissan 3.8. I don't have too much to report on that because we haven't driven it yet. I'm trying to get my hands on it, though. I do understand that Nissan was able to get TFL Car a Nissan Frontier with the 3.8, so you might want to head over to them. They're probably going to have a video on it soon. I have heard that the fuel economy was not everything that was promised, unfortunately. I'm not entirely clear how the 9-speed integrates with it either. I've been asking for the Frontier, but I was told by our Nissan person that it may not happen because it is supposed to be completely redesigned, of course. So we'll see exactly how that goes. View on the new Kia Cadenza, the Creative 300. So let's see. Here's the deal with the Cadenza. The Cadenza is a great car, but I probably wouldn't buy one. The problem is nobody's buying that kind of car, I think, is the problem with the Cadenza. It looks good, it's comfortable, I like the interior, but the ultimate problem with the Cadenza And honestly, the ultimate problem with Buicks as well as Acuras, to a large extent, and the Kia Stinger, is that when you're making a premium product, customers, it seems like the customer that's interested in a premium thing has either decided that they want those features for less in a mainstream brand, or they want to go full on luxury. So this thought process that used to occur, where you would, like the General Motors philosophy, where you would bring a customer in under Chevy, you would work their way up to Oldsmobile, then to Buick, then they would aspire to Cadillac one day, or you would Ford, then you would Mercury, then when you've really made it, you would Lincoln. I think those days are somehow over, and I think that products like the Cadenza and the Azera and the Avalon, to be honest, have gotten lost in the middle, because if you're jumping from Camry to something else, why would you Camry and then Avalon and then Lexus when a lot of people would just be willing to go Camry Lexus? And I think that that's where the Cadenza gets stuck as well. But that said, I like it. It's comfortable. It handles well. It's a very quiet car. It reminds me a lot of a Chrysler LHS that I owned. And admittedly, I bought one of those. And in a rational world, if I were looking for a sedan, I would probably give something like the Cadenza a good long look. I'm at the point in my life where I wouldn't mind something that's a little bit comfier, a little bit more relaxed, a little easier to live with. But as we see in the full-size or premium sedan sales segment in America, there aren't the numbers there, it seems like. I would argue that the Cadenza could be a hot seller in that segment if they put a lot of marketing money behind it. But you'll notice that Dodge doesn't market the Charger very much. Toyota does not market the Avalon very much, etc. Because the sales numbers just really aren't there. Let's see here. Is the CX-5 diesel the most disappointing car of last year? I don't think I would say that necessarily. I'm happy that they made it. I like the CX-5 overall. I think it depends on the price tag, and I think it's being priced properly now. So I don't know if I would say that necessarily. I would say the most disappointing car of last year would probably be a Mitsubishi Cross Sport. Maybe the Eclipse Cross. Either way, Mitsubishi's got some work to do. Anyway, moving along here. Overall advice to auto consumers at this time. My overall advice, I think, would be if you have the money to buy a new car, ride this storm out. There are going to be some really great deals coming soon. So now is the time to do your shopping, do your R&D, decide what you want, decide what you can afford, do all of your online shopping, all that kind of stuff. Watch our videos. Click on ads. And then once the drama seems to have finally evaporated, we will definitely see some cash on the hood. There even has been talk of bringing back cash for clunkers, whether it's a formal government program or whether that's just the marketing line that someone's going to use at a car company. We don't know yet, but there's definitely going to be a lot of cash on the hood. Let's see here. Will we review the 2021 Sorento? We certainly will. What do I think of the styling on the 2021 Sorento? I like the styling overall, but the interior, I think I might want to see till I have some firm opinions there. I'm a little bit sad that Kia's following Hyundai down the rabbit hole of the smaller infotainment screen and the big LCD instrument cluster. I kind of wish it was the other way around. My Nexo has a tiny LCD instrument cluster and a 12-inch infotainment screen. I think that's the better order of operations, but we'll see. Is a 7 or 8 seat Grand Cherokee coming soon to the USA? No, the answer, definitely for sure, absolutely not on that one. But there is going to be a 3-row Jeep at some point. We just don't know exactly when that's going to happen. JMEC is asking G90 or LS500. I would definitely G90. I think the G90 is more the Lexus that I remember in my head, in a way. Moving along here. BMW 328i or 2012 Audi A4. Oh, going back in time. I think I might 328i. That's just my personal thought there. Will we review the new Silverado 2500 HT? We actually have a number of Silverado... let me correct that. We do have GMC Sierra videos out already. And I would say go ahead and check out the Sierra video because the differences between the Silverado and the Sierra really just come down to the dealer you're getting on the lot and the styling of the grille on the front. There really is very little difference between the GMC and the Chevy version. And if anybody from General Motors is watching this podcast, I would just say these are the two product lines that I wish had a conjoined media program, because I think this would help us in the media and you, the consumer, understand why both exist. And this is an eternal question. So why do we have Chevy? Why do we have GMC? Aside from the reality that dealer network is probably the real reason that we have both. Theoretically, why do we have both? Who's looking for what? Where is the angle here? Who's targeting who? We have a Chevy launch, and then we have a GMC launch. They're in different locations. They try and play like they're totally separate companies, and pretend like they have nothing to do with one another. And they're clearly the same truck with a different grille. So with that in mind, I wish someone would just sit down and go, here's the Chevy, here's the GMC. This is who we're targeting with this one. This is why this one exists. Let's drive them back to back and see which one you like better. They just don't seem to do that. Anyway, Ford Ranger T6. I am not familiar with the Ranger T6. That is not an American model, so I would have to defer you to someone in Europe. Have you heard anything about the 2021 Mazda 6? We have not heard a peep. The Mazda 6 definitely is due for a redesign, but I would not be surprised if the CX-5 got redesigned first. So we'll see. Mazda 6 does not sell terribly well. Mazda's got some sales issues to work through. The CX-9 is somehow last in its segment. I'm curious. I really don't understand. I think the CX-9 should be much better selling than it is. The Mazda 6, I'm a little hit and miss on. I think that it kind of deserves its sales position in the charts right now. But that being said, the majority of Mazda's line as far as sales is the CX-5, so it's probably where they're going to focus their attention. Thoughts on the Model Y? My big thought on the Model Y is that it is a blow-up Model 3, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's basically a Model 3 liftback, hatchback, whatever you want to call it. I think it's going to sell like hotcakes. I would not be surprised if it outsells the Model 3 if they can get production where they need it to go. And I wouldn't be surprised if it outsold the Model 3 in calendar year 2020. My only sideways thought on the Model Y is that I think it's hilarious that I get so much shit for commenting how EVs should have heat pumps from the Teslarati crowd. And I get written in all the time about, oh, in this video you said that heat pumps are whatever, and they're terrible things. No one should ever have a heat pump in an EV. And guess what we have in the Model Y? We have heat pump. And that's because heat pumps are good things. They reduce energy consumption. They improve efficiency. So I'm actually really stoked about that in the Model Y. I think in real-world driving, even though the Model Y is theoretically going to have lower range than a Model 3, simply because of that heat pump and some of the other design tweaks that we see in the Model Y, I wouldn't be surprised if it had a longer real-world range, especially in winter weather, even mild winter weather, versus a Model 3. And you're really going to notice a difference when it starts getting cold out there. When you're down there around 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, I think that the Model Y is definitely going to have a significant range advantage over the Model 3. We definitely see that, for instance, in other EVs out there, and that's one of the big reasons when we last tested, we last had a EV roundup here at Alex Autos, and we did the Bolt, the Leaf Plus, the Kia Niro EV, and the Model 3 that we had for a while. The longer range was definitely in the Niro because of the way that the heat pump was done. And of course, Kia's being a little conservative on range, and Tesla was being a little bit optimistic. But at any rate, I like the Model 3. I really think that the third row seats are going to be useless, though. I'm going to have to see those, when they actually happen. But based on the overall size of the Model Y, I'm not too excited about that third row. Let's put it that way. What are our thoughts on reliability? Father says that Toyota and Honda are the only brands really worth it. I would say it ultimately depends on how long you keep your vehicle. This is the problem. So if you are the average American, you keep your car 6 to 7 years. The average vehicle in North America is over 10 years old, but that's because it's on its second owner. So if you're the first owner and you're buying a brand new car, then reliability is going to be important to you, especially long-term reliability, if you keep your car a long time. If you lease a car, only 3-year reliability is important. And when you take a look at short-term reliability, there is incredibly little difference between a Toyota product and a Land Rover. You lease a Land Rover for 3 years, you're probably going to have one or two more problems over the lease period. It's not going to be a big deal. I wouldn't necessarily want to own a Land Rover that's 10 years old, but a 3-year-old one is fine. If, however, you are keeping your car longer, that's the problem there. Let's see here. Is the CX-5 the best small SUV? I think it's the best looking small SUV at the moment. I would have to say that at the moment, best small SUV would probably be something like the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid in my mind, or the Honda CR-V Hybrid. I really like both of those two options. I'm really stoked on the hybrids in that segment because they have a huge impact on fuel economy and real-world cost of operations, even now when fuel is relatively inexpensive, because of the massive improvement in fuel economy. Our CR-V, or RAV4 hybrid rather, that we have has been averaging 38 miles per gallon. If you aren't trying to drive gently at all, a regular RAV4, especially if you're doing a lot of stopping in traffic, is going to get, maybe 20, 22. So it's a pretty big difference. And even at $2 a gallon, you'll definitely pay off that $800 price bump. Let's see here. Are we going to review a 2020 A4 or 2020 A3? Thanks for the super chat there, by the way. Are we going to review the A3? Probably not yet, because the A3 is going to get the A3 is getting redesigned here, so we probably aren't going to have an A3, but we will have the A4 for sure. The A4 has somehow passed us by somehow, and I'm not entirely clear how that happened. The A3, we're hearing that we will get the European A3 that we just recently saw debuted, but it's going to grow a trunk by the time it comes to America. So it's not going to be hatch or wagon. It's going to be trunk only. Let's see here. So if Nissan was watching, what would we say to them right now? I would say to them, let's stop trying to build pickup trucks and focus on giving us more fun options of something else. Or redesigning the Nissan Rogue, which is their best-selling product at the moment. And for the Y truck part, you will have to wait until our Nissan Titan review comes out next week, and you will see that. Let's see here. What is my background with autos? Blah, blah, blah. My background was that I was a technical writer for a while. I was attempting to be an electrical engineer at one point in my life, and I just couldn't do the math, to be perfectly frank. But most everybody in my family is an engineer, and I actually own half of a materials engineering company. So there's a lot of engineering going on here. So we do primarily metallurgical and ceramic failure analysis and electron microscopy on that side of the business, and that's what's happening. Well, that's what should be happening on that side of the wall. Unfortunately, we are all under shelter in place for coronavirus, and so at the moment, nothing is happening on that side of the wall. What is the most reliable pickup truck in the market? Half ton, 3/4 ton, 1 ton. That is a good question. There does not seem to be much of a difference, honestly, in reliability when we're talking about the pickup truck segment. And part of why that seems to be is that there are so many different options and configuration challenges there with pickup trucks that I think some of the reliability metrics just get a little fuzzy. So, I mean, you take a look at the F-150 lineup, for instance, there's so many different body configurations, multiple different frames, engines, etc. available, that we see that same level of complexity in most manufacturers' lineups as well. And that kind of leads to skewed numbers, I would say. It's a tricky one. Cross-Sport review coming soon. Yes, the Volkswagen Cross-Sport should be coming. I think it's being delivered on Monday, so we should have that soon. Will the Prius 5 ever make a comeback? No. I think the Prius 5 is dead, so that one is definitely gone. Why? Because wagons don't sell well in the US, and hatchbacks, generally speaking, don't sell well either, with very few exceptions. The only exceptions seem to be in the subcompacts segment of America. Then all of a sudden hatchbacks sell well. Who knows why? But other than that, it does not sell well. Let's see here. CLA 35 AMG. We are going to have a CLA 250 here very soon, so be sure and stay tuned for that review. We are going to definitely be talking about the CLA 35 in that segment. I like the thought of what AMG is doing now, or what Mercedes is doing now with their AMG products. They're creating this mid-level AMG trim, which is bringing some of the excitement of AMG down to the middle. Now, I know that dyed-in-the-wool AMG enthusiasts are absolutely having conniptions over this, because they're saying that, you know, the GLC 43 is not a real AMG, the CLA 35 is not a real AMG, the CLA 45 is not a real AMG. I think that it doesn't really matter on that front. They can believe what they want. I like the thought that there is a performance division involved in the tuning and design, and that there is a more affordable, more attainable middle ground where you can get the power and some of the features that you would see in a full-on AMG model for a little bit less. So I'm okay with that. Let's see here. Why do people crap all over the Chrysler 2.4 when it's competitive with every naturally aspirated engine in its segment? I have never been the hugest fan of the 2.4 liter. I think that the problem is the engine's fine. Its power and torque curves are a little off where we see other competitors. I think the biggest problem with the 2.4 in previous vehicles were the transmissions it was mated to, and the fact that it was oftentimes paired with a vehicle that was heavier than its competitor, and that therefore yields lower performance. Weight is definitely a problem in a lot of FCA platform designs. My Durango is really heavy. And so when you take a look at the engine output numbers, and even though it has a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, performance is definitely muted because it's lugging around a lot of weight, and that definitely hampers overall performance. Let's see. Is the Prius Prime worth the extra cost over the Prius? I would say it absolutely is, with an asterisk that it depends on your tax situation. So remember, the Prius Prime gets a federal tax rebate, and if you qualify for the tax credits on the Prius Prime, then it will actually make it less expensive than a Prius. So I would definitely go for that. Favorite snack food at gas stations? I don't actually buy snack foods at gas stations. I don't know. Maybe Fritos. If there was a Frito there, I might be able to. I might get that. I don't know. We'll see. I can usually avoid the Fritos. Will the Prius Limited version ever be available with all-wheel drive? That is a good question. I think it would depend on what portion of Prius sales are all-wheel drive, how that really sorts out in their product mix. I think it also will have a little bit to do with the relative success of the Camry all-wheel drive. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Prius moved in that direction at some point in time. But remember that there are a lot of Prius fans out there that want the Prius to be the ultimate in efficiency. And so the thought of making other trims available with all-wheel drive sort of goes against the grain for efficiency. Since to maximize efficiency, you really want just one wheel doing the driving. Let's see here. Would it be wise to add a supercharger to my Dodge Charger GT? I mean, that's up to you. What is your reasonable or obtainable dream car? I don't know if I have one. Reasonable or obtainable dream car? If I had a daily commute and I had a regular day job and I didn't ever have to drive press cars over and over and over again, I might get a Volvo S90. Maybe. In my head. Let's move on here. What do you think that my Corolla Hybrid is doing 62 mpg that is 10 mpg more than advertised? Blah. I would say if your car's computer is giving you 62 mpg at 70 miles an hour, then there's something wrong with your car's trip computer. Moving along here, will the Prius Prime have all-wheel drive E? Probably not, because the battery pack is bigger in the rear. So it doesn't sound like they're going to add that option. It could be a packaging issue there. David says, when will manufacturers realize that CVTs are terrible and stop installing them in cars? Probably never, because they have to get fuel economy numbers where they need to go. So you are definitely going to be seeing more CVTs, not less CVT. So we have CVTs now in Toyota products, Honda products, even Hyundai and Kia are moving to CVTs in their products. Nissan, of course, has been at the CVT game for some time. We have CVTs now in the Buick Encore and upcoming GM products as well. Not actually sure who's making their CVT at the moment. And I would not be surprised if even some of the last holdouts like Mazda ended up with a CVT in their less expensive vehicles in the long run. So if you are not a fan of CVTs, then you may need to make sure you make enough money to buy a bigger or more expensive car. Let's see here. XC90, Q7, or GLE, 3 kids in car seats. Ooh, 3 kids in car seats. That is an interesting one. All 3 of those can be a little bit tricky with car seats because you're going to want to find a wide one. So the Q7 or the XC90 might be the better options in that segment. Getting anybody into the third row with the child seats in place is still going to be tricky. If you want to do that, then you may need to look at something like the Infiniti QX60, which is not going to be as fun by any stretch. Or move up to something like a Mercedes-Benz GLS, which option, oddly enough, will let you keep 3 child seats latched into place and still access the third row. GLS is quite unique in that there. Or you can look down market a little bit, something like a Volkswagen Atlas. It will let you do that. But in that luxury segment, especially in that size category, there's not a lot that will. Let's see here. Do you think the Pilot should have Odyssey's 10-speed automatic transmission? I would agree, yes, it should. The reason it doesn't is because Honda has a contractual obligation to buy a certain number of transmissions from ZF. We don't know how many that is or when that will be done, but until that is done, you will see the 9-speed in a whole bunch of Honda products. Let's see here. When did you meet Sofian from Redline Reviews? What do you appreciate about him and his channel? I don't know when I met Sophie. Years ago. We always travel in the same circles. On launch events, you see the same people over and over again. So my usual group is I'll sit with Matt Moran from Matt Moran Motoring, Jason Fensky from Engineering Explained, Sophie and Bay, Roman Micah from TFL Car, or any of his sundry videographers and editors. They're all a great bunch over there at TFL Car. Bunch of other outlets there as well. People from Motor Trend and Car and Driver that I know and will sit with as well. So you all just end up in the same journalist stew that is floating around at a launch event. So you all end up knowing each other well. And there are times in the year where we spend more time with one another than our spouses sometimes. Sometimes I see Roman Micah more than I see my spouse. Sometimes he does as well. So let's see, appreciate about him and his channel. I like that he remembers things better than I do. So I'm always the one that has to write notes. So I'm always referring to my notes to make sure that I get the numbers right. And he just rattles them right off the top of his head. We also just have slightly different takes on things. He's more of an enthusiast person, and I'm more willing to look at the nuts and bolts and be interested in how does it work and get down that rabbit hole. And I tend to gloss over some things that he's going to be paying more attention to. I don't necessarily care too much about wheel design or the looks of the car. I've always been the person to say, if you like the look of the car, then you do you buy the car. It's fine. I like cars that I like, and you like cars that you like. And I don't think that there's a right or wrong on the aesthetics part. So instead, I focus more on the engineering side and the pricing and value, because I think that any car can be a winner if it's priced right. And for me, value ends up being one of the most important classifications there. So moving along there, let's see here. Can we elaborate more on Seltos and how it stacks up versus the competition? The Seltos, I think, actually is an interesting little entry there, because Kia has the Soul, and Hyundai has the Venue, and now we have the Seltos and sort of kind of the Kona there. And seeing the way the winds are blowing, they've decided to throw tons and tons of crossovers at us. And the Seltos, I think, is going to be a better priced and more reliable corollary to the Jeep Compass. It's kind of a tweener. It's not as big as something like a Sportage or a Tucson, but it's definitely bigger than the average entry in that segment and can have the turbo engine and all-wheel drive, which I think are definitely a good combo on that one. See, how do we think of the new Sentra? That Sentra video is going to come up soon. We filmed it last week. It was a very, very orange one, so be sure and stay tuned for that one. David's asking, is Toyota considered a reliable car, or has this myth already passed? Toyota is unquestionably reliable. I would argue that for a lot of folks out there, there are going to be good alternatives that are far more reliable than they have been before, and therefore the window between them has narrowed. Not to disparage Toyota's reliability at all there. When will we do a review of the Model Y? That should be out soon. Hopefully as soon as we can get a hold on one, of course. What is my favorite crossover? Ooh, that's a tricky one. Favorite crossover. I would say it depends on the size. If we're talking about small crossovers, I do like the new Seltos, but I also like the Jeep Compass. Going a little bit larger, the RAV4 Hybrid is a great option. So is the Honda CR-V Hybrid that we recently reviewed. That video is just out now. That's a great option as well. We're going to see an entirely new Sorento from Kia soon. That's going to be a good option, I think, in the 3-row crossover segment. I think a very underrated crossover might actually be the better way to answer this, and that's the Mazda CX-9. The CX-9 is gorgeous, but somehow it is the worst-selling 3-row crossover in America, and I really don't understand why. It looks good, it's efficient, it's relatively quick, it has a very well-crafted interior, very practical second-row seats. Just does not sell well for some reason at all. Moving along here. What are our thoughts on AC versus DC charging? Well, my thought is that one is definitely faster. I think I need more info on thoughts there. I mean, generally speaking, DC fast charging is going to be harder on your battery, so your battery is going to wear faster. AC charging is going to be the best on your battery because it's a slower charge. So you could slow DC charge and it wouldn't make a difference, but right now we're talking about fast charging. DC charging is expensive because it also is going to lead to lower or higher losses rather in charging. Just there's a greater efficiency loss in that process there. So definitely keep that in mind as well. Let's see here. Do you think CX-9 should have come with a more powerful 5 or 6 cylinder engine? I would have liked to have seen one in the CX-9, but the fact of the matter is Mazda is a very, very small car company. I mean, remember that when you take a look at the entirety of Mazda's sales, they're not selling a lot. So when you look at RAV4, I'm sure someone will correct me, RAV4 either outsells all of Mazda or it's pretty darn close. So remember that a car company has to have the resources to develop unique products, or they have to decide that they're going to make all their products closely related. And on the Mazda side, we see all their products being very closely related because that's what they can afford. And that would be the problem of trying to go to something rear-wheel drive. Now, there are rear-wheel drive rumors at Mazda, so we may see new platforms in the future, but then logically, most of their product line would get very closely related on that new platform in the future. Ford F-150 or Ram 1500, I would say it depends on what you're looking for. In a generalistic way, I would probably lean towards Ram 1500 at the moment because it's newer and I like the interior. But the Ford F-150 has higher payload and higher towing numbers in some configurations. If you're going to diesel, I would actually go to the General Motors trucks. I like their inline 6 diesel a little bit better. I like some of the features in the Ram 1500, and I like the look a little bit better as well, but that's a tough call. It really depends on exactly what you're after. I like the Ram 5.7 liter V8. If you're looking at the V6, I might go over to the Ford side. If you're looking at the V8, I would say the 5.7 is a good, strong option. Let's see here. What are our thoughts? Oh, we already answered that one. Any thoughts on methanol? Not too many thoughts there, to be honest, really. Let's see, is ZF going to redesign the 9-speed? Not that we have heard. We'll review the Encore GX. That is coming soon. So the GX review is coming probably in about 2 to 3 months. I was supposed to drive it next week. Yeah, next week, but that got canceled. So who knows when that will be at this moment. So MQN is asking, are hybrids are more reliable because they lack automatic transmissions? Well, that depends on the hybrid, actually. So Toyota's hybrids have been the most reliable hybrid system available so far, followed closely by Ford's, which is essentially the same system with some slight architectural tweaks. And the General Motors hybrids and Chrysler's hybrids have actually been pretty reliable overall as well, based on that same general design. Honda's hybrids, the two-motor system has been a little bit less reliable, but overall still fairly good. Hyundai and Kia's hybrids have had some stumbles initially, and the main reason for that is that they do use a automatic transmission still. So if you're using or driving the Sonata or the Optima hybrid, it has a 6-speed automatic, and if you're driving an Ioniq or a Niro, then they have a 6-speed dual clutch transmission. So there's a little bit more complexity in those vehicles right there. Let's move along here. Do you think we're on the precipice of the best time to buy a new car? GMC is offering 84 months of 0% financing. Wow, that is a really good deal. If there's cash on the hood and 84 months of free money, I might get a GMC. I might get a GMC over that Ram 1500 you were just asking me about. Let's see here. Jeff Adams is asking, actually, I think this is a great question. So Jeff Adams is asking, Toyota's hybrids get high marks of reliability, but it's much more complicated than an ICE car. So how can it be more reliable than an ICE? Well, here's the deal. So Toyota's hybrid systems are actually far less complicated than a traditional car, and that's why they're so reliable. So let's talk about that now. So in the average automatic transmission out there, we have at least 3 planetary gear set elements that allow you to change gears. We have clutches. We have multiple clutches, by the way, because you got to have clutches to change gears so the power can flow through the different planetary gear sets differently. We've got reduction gear sets. We have dog clutches and moving elements that allow the transmission to move in reverse so that we can spin the gear sets the other direction so that we can drive the car backwards, etc. We have a torque converter. We have clutch packs on the torque converter to lock it up to improve overall efficiency, etc. None of that happens in Toyota's hybrid cars, and that's why they are so efficient. So in a Toyota hybrid car, we have a single planetary gear set at their heart. Now, obviously, there are different versions of Toyota's hybrid system, and some of their later hybrid systems have incorporated a secondary planetary gear set, but at the core of the system is a single planetary gear set. And I'm going to get this order wrong, but it doesn't matter, because the concept is the same, and Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, and Toyota all use variants of this same layout. So we have a Sun gear here, and the Sun gear, for instance, could be connected to the ICE, the internal combustion engine right there. And then we have a ring planetary gear set right there that's connected via a carrier. And this carrier is connected to, say, MG1. And then we have the ring gear around the end that's connected to MG2, for instance. And again, this variance changes based on the vehicle you're looking at. So, for instance, I believe in Toyota's vehicles, the internal combustion engine is on the planetary gear carrier, and MG1 is the Sun gear in the middle. Doesn't matter. Basically, what's going on here is MG2 is connected to the wheels. So if you want to drive the car forward, you spin that gear forward. Now, if you want to drive the car backward, you don't have to engage anything. You just spin the motor the other way. That's the big benefit from Toyota's hybrid systems. But if I change the page here and realize that I'm on camera, so I should draw bigger, that would probably help. When we're taking a look at this setup, and we have... And now I have made the drawing just only slightly bigger, so it's probably not helping you at all. But if we take a look at this setup here, this is what's going on. So wheels are connected to this collar gear here, and that's driving the vehicle forward or driving the gear backwards. So again, no need to change gears there. Now, if the engine is connected to this set right here, you'll notice that this gear can still spin, this motor can still spin this gear around even when the engine is standing still, because it's connected to the carrier, not the individual gears itself. So this gear can just spin around and around and around, and the engine will just do nothing. Now, that means that we don't have a clutch to engage or disengage the engine, for one. So another part removed from some of those other systems out there. We don't have to have a torque converter either. So another part removed. No fluid pumps in that same mechanism either. And then if we want to engage the engine to flow power mechanically, that's where this little guy in the middle plays in. That's MG1. And this is MG2. They're lovely animations, by the way, so this is by no means supposed to be a complicated animation here. But here's what's going on. So Engine wants to drive the wheels forward. What you have to do is you have to drag MG1 basically a little bit. And if you drag MG1, that allows power mechanically to flow rather from this planetary gear set carrier to the ring gear out to the wheels. And you would do that by generating power from MG1 that's causing the drag, that's causing everything to spin in alignment. And then because you're generating power, you send that along to MG2 to help augment the thing down the road. But the bottom line here is that we have electric motors, which are very reliable. Electric motors in all cars are very, very reliable. And we have no additional clutch packs or any of that sort of thing that we have going on in a traditional hybrid, or a non-hybrid rather, out there. So even though it seems like that kind of system would offer greater mechanical complexity, complexity is actually reduced across the board. So in terms of design complexity, programming complexity for a lot of the vehicle's component systems, and just pure hardware complexity, it actually is less complex than many non-hybrids out there. So that's the reason that we have those reliability numbers. Let's see here. Let's take a look at some of the last questions here because we're starting to run out of time. Let's see here. Please tell me that Mazda will have a new transmission replace the old 6-speed but not a CVT. So the rumor mill is that we are going to get an 8-speed automatic transmission at some point. But to be perfectly honest, in smaller Mazdas, it probably will get a CVT. We may or may not see them in the US, but we still will probably see a CVT at some point there. I would not be surprised, for instance, if the Yaris, which is basically a Mazda, ended up with a CVT. So moving along here, what's the least reliable hybrid? At the moment, the least reliable hybrid by long-term metrics, and this is one key thing to remember about hybrid reliability, or any reliability, is that we're talking about old models. So when we talk about hybrid reliability, we're not talking about, generally speaking, currently produced vehicles, because we have to wait years for the reliability numbers to come. Least reliable hybrids are probably going to be the Hyundai Kia hybrids. Because there's greater mechanical complexity in those. We have the automatic transmission and a motor and the engine. And so it's a very different design than we find under the hoods of Toyotas. Let's see here. Someone's asking, following with AC versus DC charging, being an original sole EV owner, in your opinion, do you believe the trajectory for EVs is to go with larger batteries, higher wattage EVs that charge primarily on AC? Or having a lower capacity fast charging EV that could put lower demand chargers, but greater pressure, blah, blah. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly what the future holds for us in EVs there. There's a lot of argument to be made that in a rational world, we wouldn't have big batteries because that's not our general use case. But I think that because car buyers are so concerned with range, that is probably where we're going to go. We probably are going to be heavily focused on, for at least for a while, heavily focused on new EVs with big batteries, even though in a rational world, it probably does not make that much sense. Impressions on the 2021 Golf and Elantra. I like the Golf. It definitely looks like a Golf. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit exciting looking, that may not be it. On the Elantra side, I really like the interior. I'm not so sure on the trunk. Let's see here. What my opinion on using electric clutch with manual transmission? Is this good manual transmission or is it? I have never heard people using an electric clutch with a manual transmission before. I'm going to have to do some research on that. I have never heard on that. Thoughts on the Rivian on the back wall? That is one that we have on order, so hopefully it will happen at some point later this year. Thoughts on the Buick Envision? I am surprised that the Buick Envision has never been around for review. If you are Buick and you are listening to this, then send us an Envision. We've been asking for one for years, and it has never happened, and I'm not entirely clear why. Lots of good deals going on the Envision, we're told. It is definitely pretty cheap. How they are to drive, I really honestly couldn't say, because we haven't driven one. So with that out of the way, it is now almost 3 o'clock, so it is time to sign off. So thanks everybody for watching. Be sure and hit that merch button down there, or the merch link down there at the bottom of the video. You'll see some of those options across your screen. There's also a link to go to the Teespring shop. You can also find us over at facebook.com/AlexNautos. If you want to see weird photos, you can go to Instagram and find us over there at Instagram. And that's about it. I will see all of you later, hopefully next week.